Mr. North and South American, all ships at sea, let's go to
The Bitchspot Report. Welcome to The Bitchspot Report, the podcast with news and views from a distinctly conservative atheist perspective, with your hosts, Cephas and Out West. We hope we can entertain, educate, perhaps even enrage you. Now let's begin this episode of The Bitchspot Report. Welcome to the first episode of The Bitchspot Report. Let's get the introductions out of the way. I'm Cephas, a longtime atheist blogger and outspoken conservative voice in what is essentially a conservative wasteland. I come from a fundamentalist Christian background, attended all religious schools, and was seriously considering entering the ministry before I came to the stark realization that religion, particularly Christianity, was bullshit. Since then, I've spent the last 30 years debating theists, both on and offline, in what is essentially a futile effort to spread reason to the world. It also puts me in a rather unique position. I've been able to reconcile my conservative views, which came initially out of my religious background, with my current atheist position, and come up with a rational whole, something that I very rarely see in the atheist community. I hope I can offer a perspective that is intelligent and compelling, and that is not the same thing you hear on every podcast. Then we have my partner, Out West.
Hi, I'm Out West. I also am a former evangelical Christian that just really came to my atheism by realizing that I could not reconcile the things I was being taught and the things I was reading with what I saw around in the world. So, and I am a conservative as well, and I had no problem being a conservative and an atheist at the same time. I don't see how any of that is in any way different. Most people think that atheists are all progressives. I think there's actually a lot of us out there that are conservatives, and I'm basically a classic conservative. And we'll get into that later on in the show.
And now the news.
Welcome to In the News. What we're essentially going to do here is that each week we're going to pick a couple of different news stories that are reasonably recent, and we're going to talk about them. Our first story comes from the Colorado Independent newspaper. It's a story about a Catholic hospital in Colorado which had Lori Stodgehill be brought in. She was extremely sick and pregnant with twins 7 months along. She was extremely ill. She went into cardiac arrest and died. The hospital did nothing whatsoever to deliver the twins. This went to court. Her husband filed charges against the hospital, saying that they certainly could have done something about her twins, and chose not to. And the Catholic hospital, which is very much anti-abortion, pro-save the children, said, well, hell, it's not our problem. Fetuses aren't human. What exactly are we supposed to believe from these people? Are we going to listen to what they say, or are we going to watch what they do? What's your reaction?
I think that this is just crazy. I mean, it's completely contradictory with where they stand, on abortion and saving lives and being pro-life and everything. And of course, they're going to try and make any kind of defense so that they don't have to pay millions of dollars to this guy who basically they killed his wife and 2 children.
Well, they didn't kill his wife. She was going to die anyway. There was really nothing that they could do about her. But the point was, here we have some people who they're rah, 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 let's stop abortion, every life is sacred. But as soon as they get it backed into a corner, and this is true of everything the Catholic Church does when you think about it. Let's face it. They sit around and say, well, we think of the children, but we hide all of our child molester priests.
Yeah, that's true. Isn't that funny? Yeah, they're all about family. And as I've said before, you've heard me say, is that, they put all these restrictions on their members or congregants to be able to do anything, and yet don't seem to want to follow them themselves at any time or place. And so, I just think I think it's a hilarious story, and that they're coming out with this. And what I'm really surprised about is that this is not getting more attention in the mainstream media. I don't think I've seen a story on the news about it. There may have been, but I don't think I've seen anything about it.
I've seen a few, but they're not major news stories. I think everybody's pretty much convinced that the Catholic Church are a bunch of hypocrites anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, this is nothing new for them. I mean, seriously, if the Catholic League jumped up and said, "Hey, look, we're doing stupid crap again," nobody's going to be surprised. That's just what the Catholic Church does.
Yeah, and that's it just doesn't make them look good at all. And I would prefer to see this get more attention. I mean, just like the one in the story in Ireland, where the woman had a problem with her pregnancy, and because the fetus had a heartbeat, this was a Catholic. Well, it was actually the law in Ireland that as long as there was a heartbeat, that they couldn't abort the fetus, and so the woman died from it. Now, how stupid is that? So they.
Well, let's remember they did tell her she could leave the country to get an abortion if she really wanted to.
Right, but how long is that going to take?
Oh, of course. I mean, it's a ridiculous proposition.
Yeah.
It's like saying, well, this is a Mormon country. We're not going to allow you to do,
drink coffee.
We're not going to allow you to cut off your arm that's gangrenous because that's just the way we believe. Well, screw you.
Yeah, exactly. That's just really a crazy story there in Colorado. And to be honest, I hope they lose big time.
Well, unfortunately, they didn't.
Oh, they didn't.
The first time through, the Catholic hospital won because in reality, they're right. A fetus is not considered a human. They have no obligation whatsoever under the law to go to extraordinary lengths to save the fetuses. So they won. It's being appealed, but the point isn't whether or not they're guilty or not guilty. The fact is, the point is whether or not they're hypocrites.
Yeah.
And clearly they are.
They clearly are hypocrites. Yeah, that is actually a sad story for the gentleman in the story. And again, it just, you're right. They're complete hypocrites for making that argument.
It's a no-win situation.
Yeah, that's a shame. Our next story is this past weekend. There was a huge, last weekend, I think it was Saturday, a huge rally in Washington, D.C., where literally hundreds of thousands of people came out. Estimates are above 400,000, by the way, came out in support of pro-life position, that they want the government to, pass laws to overturn Roe v. Wade, basically, because it's the 40th anniversary of that decision. And so what happened was, of course, they had a bunch of speakers. They had a platform, bunch of speakers. Well, guess who came out? Speaker of the House, John Boehner. And John Boehner said, told this crowd that ending abortion, is one of our most fundamental goals this year, meaning the Republican Party. And, of course, he got big cheers for that. And when I saw that, when I read this story, it's from the Huffington Post, by the way, I was just amazed that he would say something like that. I mean, okay, let me see. We've got actual double-digit unemployment. We've got an economy I just read today, where the economy contracted 0.1% in the last quarter. We've got all these other problems going on in this country, and ending abortion is a priority for these people. What do you think?
Well, to be honest, we know why they're doing it. They're preaching to the choir. That's what their base wants, and they're just going to say whatever the base wants. They're just going to say, this is what we're going to do. Of course, we know it's ridiculous because they can't do it. They can make those claims all they want. They can ride the big anti-abortion train around the country. It won't make a damn bit of difference. They're not going to overturn Roe v. Wade.
Right, I agree. And I took it the same way as preaching to the choir. But still, that when that makes the news, that just hurts their brand, I think, the Republican brand, because most people I think, anyway, at least most people I know, are pro-choice. And, it's give the woman a right to choose. And I don't care if you do have 450 or, some estimates were over 500,000 people there from all over the country. It's still, is this the issue that you want to put forward to the American people? There's 330 million of us in this country. Is this your main issue for the year? Not putting people back to work, not trying to fix the deficit and the debt.
Well, they don't actually want to do any of those things. That actually takes work.
Yeah.
They're not going to do any work. They're going to say, well, we're going to tell you we're going to do this, which is completely impossible for us to do, and that way we'll pretend we do something along the way, and at the end of the time we'll go, hey, see, look, we tried to do what we told you we were going to do, even though we knew it was impossible to begin with. Did I send you the link where the GOP they've got a survey out right now where they want to know what people think that they should do in the coming year?
No, I didn't see that.
Well, I'll put a link to it in the show notes. But go over and it asks you what you think is important, and then it says go ahead and fill in all of, give us your suggestions because we want to be responsive to our constituents.
Right.
They don't want anything to do with their constituents. They want to follow their base and do exactly what they say and ignore everything else. I went in and I said, guys, you don't want to listen to what I have to say, because what I have to say is boot your base out and actually start focusing on the issues. Stop focusing on social politics.
No,
they're not going to listen to me anymore.
Right. They're not going to listen to you because their money and most of their support comes from the right-wing religious nut jobs, basically. And that's where it comes from, and they don't want to do anything that is going to, jeopardize that. And that's why he comes out and says, abortion is, a top priority for us this year, ending abortion. Yeah,
but the problem is that they're not getting elected on those platforms.
I know, and that's a shame. Well, that comes back to, and we're going to get into this later, of course, neo-conservatism versus classic conservatism.
Right.
And we'll get into that, later.
All right. Well, let's move on to our next story. This one comes from, actually, the Christian Newswire. The Americans for Truth About Homosexuality, great name for a group there, offers resolutions for pro-family advocates battling the homosexual agenda for next year. They actually put up a list of 20 different things that they think will make homosexuality go away magically somehow. I'm not going to go through all these, obviously, but there are a couple that are just so ridiculous. Like number 3, question authority. This is coming from the religious right, who don't question the authority. Do you guys question the authority of the Bible? Do you guys question the authority of your preachers? No, you only question the authority of things you don't happen to like.
Yeah, that is really funny that they're doing that. Question authority. Really? That's unbelievable that they would say that.
Or, let's see, number 5, get off the opponent's playing field. It starts with restoring honest language in the debate. Wait a minute. These are the people who spend all their time trying to change the language. I mean, their example here is counterfeit homosexual marriage is not equal to the real deal, so the gay term marriage equality is spurious. Well, yeah, the only reason it's not equal to the real deal is because you guys just simply refuse to accept that it is. Actually, it is exactly the same as the real deal. You guys are just playing word games.
And that's all it ever is with them. It's semantics, right? And it has nothing to do with the real world. And in fact, as we know, there was a poll out in November of last year by Gallup, and 53% of the American people polled out of the sample. I didn't dig into the details of it, but exactly the demographics and everything. But 53% of the American people approve of gay marriage today, whereas you can go back only to like 1996. I know it seems like a long time ago, but it really isn't. And that same question only got a 27% response of positive. So, America has changed on this, and, people need to wake up and basically smell the roses that, hey, social change does occur. Maybe it takes a while, for it to occur, but people, the American people, do come around eventually on issues.
And it's funny because they even recognize that. If you go through a couple others of these, like number 9, it says, don't rely on the Republicans to put their agenda before God's. Well, come on, this is a secular country whether you like it or not. And you moral Democrats need to fight the evil within your party. So they're already saying you can't count on politics to beat the gay agenda. But let's face it, how are you going to deal with the gay agenda if you don't rely on politics?
Well,
I mean, politics is what greases the wheel.
No, it is, but for me, politicians are not paying attention, I guess, even to the American people. I mean, they pay attention to election polls, but other polls that have to do with any kind of social issues, and I'm talking both sides here, Democrats, Republicans, they just don't want to hear it if it doesn't fit within, the mean that they're trying to proffer out there. If it doesn't fit in that little box that they have, then they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to do anything about it. That's a shame.
Well, I mean, it's not only just a shame. It's these people are just fanatics, and all the way through this, it's just be aware that you're right, be aware that you're perfect, be aware that your beliefs are, you cannot dispute your beliefs. Gays are horrible and awful and should be taken out, shot in the streets, and all that kind of stuff. These people are not willing to listen to evidence. They're not willing to reconsider their positions. They're just right, and that's the end of it. And they can't conceive of a time where they could possibly be wrong. No,
and that's true. But I think that's going to slowly change. The old guard is going away, and the younger people that are coming up, politicians and just people on the street. I think that eventually that'll change. It may not happen in my lifetime, but it'll change eventually.
To be honest, I'm not sure anymore. I used to think there would be no way that there would ever be a measurable number of atheists in the country in my lifetime. I thought sometime, religion's going to largely go away. But over the last 10 years, we've seen a huge change. Like you said, since 96, we've gone from 26% to 53% of people who favor gay marriage. It's changing faster than we remember, and it's doing it within a relative blink of the eye.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. It is fast, but I don't know that as far as religion is concerned, and that attitude is going to completely go away within my lifetime.
Oh, it probably will never completely go away, but let's face it, the old guard are dying.
Yep.
The youngsters are not as fanatical as their parents. A lot of them are rejecting religion entirely. It's not going to be that long until religion just isn't the kind of force it is in America that it has been, up to this point.
No, I agree. I think it's less and less. I mean, you don't really hear, at least I don't really hear very many people at work ever talk about religion. Not that it's really appropriate. I don't really even know anybody that goes to church, but I bet if I did a sample poll just within my office and asked people if they identified as Jewish, Muslim, Christian, or none, I would suspect that most of them would identify as one of those religions, even though they don't actually practice it, but they would identify.
Oh, I'm sure.
As that.
Yeah.
So.
Well, see, that's the thing. I mean, that's why I basically say most of the Christians in America are really social Christians. They're only saying that they believe because they think it makes them look good to the neighbors. They don't really buy into any of this crap. You certainly don't see them going to church every Sunday. You certainly don't see them following what's in the Bible. They believe it because it's a social tool, not because it's a belief.
That's true. Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%. And the last story I think we have is something I found in the Christian Science Monitor this week, and this did make the news. There's been a lot of fighting, as most people know, going on in Mali, and the French have intervened there, and the British are going to be helping out. The Americans, of course, are helping out logistically there. But one of the things that really caught my eye was a small story in the Christian Science Monitor about how these Islamists burned, when they had control of the city of Timbuktu, which is a very ancient city, burned some ancient manuscripts that are, of course, irreplaceable, And it doesn't matter whether they're religious documents or social documents or whatever. I just find that to be horrible. And it kind of reason I wanted to talk about it a little bit is it kind of reminded me of what the Taliban did. I think it was, correct me if I'm wrong here, in 2000 with those ancient Buddhist statues that were carved into a rock wall in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. Was that where they blew them up, because they were an offense to Islam. So what do you think about that, what these Islamists do to cultural and historical documents and because they think it offends Islam?
To be honest, I am not at all surprised. It's nothing new, unfortunately. We have a lot of cases, and it's not just the Muslims. Let's face it, you go through the Middle Ages, and the Christians were doing the same thing. They were they were taking all the heretics out and killing them and burning the witches and all that. It's nothing new in religion. Unfortunately, right now, Christianity, especially in the West, has gotten it's basically become tamed. The secular world has tamed Christianity. They know they can't get away with, killing the heretics and then burning the witches and, stoning their kids for being disobedient. So, in the West, Christianity's pretty much a tame tiger.
Right.
Unfortunately, in the East, you don't have that secular influence. The Muslims have not been tamed. They still run around and kill people. They chop hands off. If you look at, especially because in Africa, what you're talking about, I've written about Boko Haram, mm-hmm. the Muslim group who is responsible for about 20,000 deaths of Christians. They blow up churches. They gun people in the streets. This is Nigeria. The government is finally starting to take notice and going out and attack this group, but these are people who think nothing of going out and just slaughtering Christians in the middle of the street because they're Christians. Why are we surprised when they're going to go out and burn books, blow up monuments, destroy history because it disagrees with them?
Yeah, I just find it, the 7th century attitude. We're in the 21st century, and a lot of these people are actually educated, and some of them have even been educated in the West. And I just find the whole attitude of, we're going to go out there and destroy some historical, cultural documents or carvings in a wall that have been there for 1,000 years. It's things that you can't replace. Just incredible, extremely incredible.
Well, up until they have a secular society and a secular government that's willing to stand up and say, hey, this is not acceptable, I don't care what you believe, it's probably not going to change. Everybody sits around and says, oh, look at how, they're all a bunch of animals in the East, and, Islam is a terrorist group. Guys, it wasn't that long ago when Christianity was doing the same crap.
Yeah, that's true, too. And, there have been, Christians that have banned in history, banned and burned books. I mean, look at the Bible itself, what we call the Apocrypha of the New Testament alone, how many different books that are out there, and they're discovering new ones, it seems like, not all the time, but every few years they'll find a cache of something else that was not included in the Bible and that was actually banned by the church because of they thought it was heretical. And I remember reading something a year or so ago about a monk burial that they found of a monk I think it was in northern Africa, a Christian monk from like the 7th century. And when they opened his casket, they found his body, of course, what was remained of it, and he was clutching a bunch of documents. And some of these documents were like I think one of them was the Gospel of Judas. Okay, and how even though that book had been banned by the church a couple centuries before that, 2 or 3 centuries before that, it was still a popular book, and it was apparently, according to the archaeologists that found it and the historians that looked at the whole thing, is that it was precious to him, so they buried it with him. And so, yeah, the Christian church has done that as well in the past, and they've killed people over what they say and what they do. You know, they've jailed, tortured. You know, no, they didn't kill Galileo, but they jailed him.
No, but they killed Bruno.
Yeah, they did kill Bruno, and but they jailed him for life, basically. You know, house arrest for life because, you know, he wanted to explore science. And so,
well, the only reason they didn't kill him is because he relented and said, "Okay, I was wrong."
Yeah.
You know, you should not have a gun to your head, you know, metaphorically, just because you refused to say, "Okay, I was completely wrong and you were completely right."
No, I agree. But back then, of course, that's the way it was. The church basically ruled the world, the Western world. So, yeah. And again, this whole thing with these Islamists, because something offends Islam, you know. Anyway, I guess we can move on from there. I'm just kind of in my credulity has just, you know, overflowed. I'm incredulous of all of these, and I don't say every Muslim does this, okay, or every Muslim would do this. So I don't want to say this. When I say, I'm saying Islamists, you know, the hardcore, just like fundy Christians, I guess, hardcore fundamentalist Christians. But I don't even think they would go that far as to burn books.
Well, they wouldn't have. I'm trying to remember the name of the pastor in Florida who burned the Quran. Or he at least threatened to burn the Quran. I'm not sure if he ever actually did it.
He didn't. I don't think he did. I think because it got so much publicity. And
well, he got publicity. He didn't do it when he said he was going to. But I think he went back and did it again later.
Okay. Yeah, I can't remember his name either, but I know the story you're talking about.
Yeah, I keep wanting to say Terry Jones, and that might be it, but
yeah,
it's been a while. So.
Yeah, it has.
But going back to what you were saying about all the books of the Bible that didn't quite make the final cut, it's funny if you actually read through some of those, just to see how ridiculous they are. And these are things that churches used to buy into. If you go back and look at the Infancy Gospel of Thomas...
Right.
There's a big passage in there that basically shows Jesus being a dick as a kid.
Yeah.
He basically cursed a couple of kids. He says, "Well, you're not doing what I want you to do. Drop dead." And the kid just goes.
Yeah, he pushed a kid off a roof.
I can't imagine why that didn't end up in the Bible.
Yeah, he pushed a kid off a roof, and then the parents were so upset. Of course, he brought him back to life. You know, but again, you know, that was before. A lot of these things were written before the church really got organized. So, under basically that's why they call it the Roman Catholic Church, I guess, is under basically a Roman hierarchy, you know, where you have your priests, your bishops, your archbishops, you've got your hierarchy, your government. So they formed a government just like the Romans had. And
right. And they all got together and decided which books they happened to like, and those are the ones that they put together in a Bible.
Yeah, I think what they didn't realize was that here we are, you know, are 2,000 years later, and a lot of people are looking at these books and scratching their heads and going, none of this makes any sense, you know. I mean, they could have chosen the Infancy Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Judas and the Apocalypse of Peter and I can't remember the name of the book, but the account of Paul and what was her name, Thera. You know, they could have chosen all those books just as well, because none of those make any sense. And you know,
none of the Bible makes sense.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They could have chosen any of those books, and it would have been just fine. You know.
Yeah, I always find it funny where you'll have Christians holding up the Bible going, "Wow, look at how great this all hangs together. 66 books written in all these languages by all these people." Dude, you haven't read this, have you? Because it doesn't hold together, and the only reason it's as good as it is because you ended up having the Council of Trent, which put it together that way specifically, so it made sense together. It wasn't written as a single book. It was put together by a group of people with an agenda.
Yeah, exactly. And, if you ever read any of Bart Ehrman's books, if anybody does, Bart Ehrman starts off, can't remember the book. I have it, but I can't remember which one it is. I have several of his books where he tells people, because if anybody out there listening doesn't know who he is, he's a New Testament scholar and professor at University of North Carolina, I think at Chapel Hill, and he writes a lot of popular books. And one of the things he says is that Christians need to take a look, for instance, at the four Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and instead of reading them horizontally, in other words, reading Matthew and then going to Mark and then to Luke and then to John, is to read them vertically.
Same event.
Yeah, read this.
Jesus interrupted, I think.
Okay, yes. Okay, thank you. Jesus interrupted. Read this. Read the same stories in each one of these and see how they compare. Well, basically, he says they don't. If you read them horizontally, beginning to end, well, by the time you get to the next gospel, you're reading the same story, but your mind has forgotten the details from the other. But if you read each event, the same way, then, vertically, then you'll see that none of it makes any sense.
Yeah, it's clear that it was all written by different people who weren't at the same events, who were not eyewitnesses.
Exactly.
Because they can't even get the most basic details. Right?
Well, one of the things that always bothered me, in the introduction, I said that, the things I was reading and being taught didn't make any sense, was that where do all these private the private conversations like Jesus had with his apostles, all the exact quotes, that came out. It's like when, you're watching a documentary about a famous figure on TV, and they say it's a docudrama because they've simulated some events, right? Because they had to fill in the gap. They know that this event occurred and X event occurred and Y event occurred, but they have to kind of fill in that gap between X and Y, so they kind of just make up some dialogue for the characters to say. Right. Well, so if the Bible, specifically the New Testament, is true, and the people that put these things down were never there when they happened, how did they know that these people actually said these specific things?
Yeah.
Impossible to know.
Well, a lot of the Bible is, all of the Bible is second, third, fourth hand accounts. We know that none of the gospel writers are actually the people that are on the gospels that are named. We know that they never saw any of these people. They never knew Jesus, if Jesus even existed. A lot of this stuff is just ideas that we had that, we're going to take information from a bunch of different sources. We're going to put them together into this story. That's why there's even accounts in the Bible where all four gospel writers can't agree on a single thing, like what was written on the sign above on Jesus' cross.
Exactly.
All four of them get it completely different. How can you be eyewitnesses, be at the same event, and not even know what the thing said?
Well, here's the thing for me also about that is supposedly Matthew and Luke used Mark as the original copy, is what they got, at least this is what scholars believe, to take their account from. And yet, again, they write different accounts. And so if and the only thing I can think of, and I've read this before as well, is that they were writing to their specific churches. Whoever Luke was writing to his specific church. And so kind of filling in the gap.
Well, not church, then they were writing to a specific
a group of people. That
Luke was writing specifically to Romans. Matthew was writing to his group.
Yeah.
They weren't necessarily.
Well, that's what I mean. To their specific group, where their specific group had a certain core belief, and so where Mark didn't fit that core belief that they had, they modified it slightly
or dramatically. And then they ended up borrowing from a lot of different mythologies that were common in the area. A lot of the things that happened in the Bible were just stolen verbatim from other religions.
Oh, exactly. It was.
But that went all the way back through the Old Testament, too. There's a funny story, and I know we're way off topic, but there's a story, if you go back to Moses, where he is, where his son finds him naked and drunk.
Right.
And he disowns the son who saw him naked and covered him up. There's a Hindu story that is identical to that. In some parts, to the word. All that was changed was the names and the areas that were given to the sons. Otherwise, it's the same story. And we can demonstrate that that story existed on paper 1,000 years before the Jews were ever a consistent sect.
Wow.
And yeah, it's ridiculous, and people take this stuff seriously.
Yeah. Well, again, it's brainwashing, right? We've talked about this before. How you're brought up to believe, and for instance, in my family, I was never forced to go to church or anything. I was never, even though we identified as Christians, but I guess, but just like I was talking earlier about how people, if you went up and asked them what they identified with, you'd find a lot of people who, even though they really don't go to church regularly or at all, would identify as Christian or whatever, Jewish or Muslim, even though they don't actually practice it. And I just find it incredible. So I was never really brainwashed. And so when I decided to become a Christian, I guess, I had that background, but because I was always taught to think for myself. And that's why I say I could never reconcile what I was being taught or what I was reading with anything, that I actually knew from the real world. And I know there's a lot of people, a lot of scientists out there that are faithful Christians, and okay, I truly don't get how you can be a doctor or any kind of scientist and dealing with the things in the real world, physicist, whatever, and not realize that you believe in a myth. So,
well, some people have the ability to compartmentalize. I used to. I mean, seriously, whereas you weren't forced to go to church, I wasn't forced to go to church either. I voluntarily went.
Yeah.
Spent most of my Sundays there. Spent my Wednesday nights there. I went to all the religious youth group meetings. I was leading those. I was going to be a damn minister because I bought into it until I realized, holy crap, what am I believing?
Yeah, I did too. I mean, when I decided to become a Christian, I voluntarily went. But again, and I bought into it for several years until, again, I just started thinking, every time I'd hear one thing in church and then another thing, witness something else outside of church, the real world. I could never bring the two together, and I could never figure out, just like the question I'm asked, where does all these conversations, I asked a pastor this once, there's all these conversations that Jesus is having privately with people, okay, in their home or somewhere out on the road. And okay, none of these people could write because they were poor fishermen and whatever, read and write. And most scholars today agree with that these were, probably maybe in the ancient world in that time, 3% maybe is an estimate could actually read and write in the ancient world. 3% of the whole population of the ancient world. And so did these people, as they're having a conversation, just like we're having this conversation now, am I memorizing what you're saying? Are you memorizing what I'm saying? No, we're having a conversation. And we may come back later and go, well, yeah, I remember Cephas said something about blah, blah, blah. And, of course, we're recording this, so I could actually go back and, slide through and find out exactly what you said. But if we were just sitting across the table from one another or sitting in the living room and having a conversation, I would say, yeah, I remember Cephas saying something about that to the effect of, but I wouldn't necessarily remember the exact words you used. And so things like that, I would ask the pastor about that. How do these people get this down? No answer. No answer. Not even trying to answer. He would, other than saying, well, it comes from tradition. That was his answer. Well, that's not an answer to me.
Well, the funny thing is, if you go back to that Bart Ehrman book we were talking about earlier, he actually goes through in the prologue and says, well, this is what really happens when you go through seminary. And pretty much nobody comes out the back end of seminary believing that the Bible is worthwhile.
Yeah.
Because, they teach you the facts. You don't come out going, well, faith and all this other crap. They come out and say, this is just not true.
Yeah, and that's where it's really funny, like you say in that prologue, because he says, and it's really disturbing because some people go through seminary to become teachers, right, like he did. Others go through to become pastors of some sort. And how difficult it must be for them to stand up in front of a congregation every week, twice a week, however many times, and to spout things that they know is not true. Yeah, how bizarre is that?
Well, unfortunately, a large portion of the population does exactly that. All right, well, let's go ahead and move on. I think we've wandered around off topic for a while.
That's okay. Hey, it's our podcast. We can do what we want, right?
That's right. Screw all you people. We can do what we feel like. All right, now let's move on to...
This is the main event.
A lot of people really have no idea what it is to be a conservative. They have been fooled by the people who took over the Republican Party in the Reagan era, the people who label themselves neo-conservatives, but whose politics have really nothing whatsoever to do with actual conservatism. In fact, I'd argue that neocons are a lot closer to liberals than liberals would like to admit. Fiscally, of course, there's virtually no difference. Both of them spend like drunken sailors. The only real difference is where they want to get the money and what they want to spend it on. Socially, I'd say they're both emotion-based. The Republicans are all about religion. The Democrats are all about touchy-feely, make people feel good nonsense. And neither one of them really operate on a rational or critical evaluation basis. In recent years, and I'm sure you'd agree with me because we've talked about this before, there just hasn't been anybody worth voting for on either side. We're having to settle for voting for the lesser of the two evils, and I'm really getting sick and tired of having to vote for evil at all.
No, I agree 100%. And because what you hear in the mainstream media about conservatives, Republican Party conservatives, these people are not conservatives at all. They come back to saying, well, we're Reagan Republicans. Well, I remember Reagan, and Reagan was... people talk about Reagan, how he was a true conservative, but Reagan played to his base a lot to the religious right, which became big in the 80s, of course, as you know, Jerry Falwell and some of the rest of those people that came out in the 80s. What was it called? The moral majority.
Moral majority,
yeah. And he played to that base. He played them like a drum.
That's the nice thing about Reagan is he didn't really buy into any of this crap. He just knew where he knew where the money was, and he knew where the votes were, and he knew how to give them lip service, and they just kept feeding them money.
But since then, we've had, holy cow, not really any real conservative Democrat or Republicans anywhere. I mean, there's people that call themselves conservative Democrats, but they're not really conservative. They don't hold for smaller government. They don't hold for being fiscally responsible, being responsible for your own person.
Right.
And I'm not saying that we should get rid of all social services, in this country, but we should be talking about personal responsibility.
Right.
And from where I stand, it's okay to have the government be there as a safety net, when all else fails. You've done your best, and you just cannot get a job, you cannot meet, your needs. It's a safety net. But what happens in a safety net? For instance, you go see trapeze artists at the circus, right? They fall into the safety net, then they get out and they get back up and they go up and do it again, right? They don't stay in the safety net. And what we are doing here, Republicans and Democrats, what they call conservatives and liberals, is that they're basically allowing people to live in the safety net. And instead of going out there and preaching personal responsibility, pick yourself up. We're there for you if you need us, but we're not there from cradle to grave for you. When you need us, we'll be there to help you. But then, for instance, this last year, they extended again unemployment benefits. So now it's almost 3 years. It was not,
and they're going to continue to do that forever. You know that.
Well, yeah. I mean, it was 99 weeks, okay, and then they've added another 50 weeks onto that. So 149 weeks. Why would I want to work if I can get, if I can meet my needs off of unemployment and food stamps? Okay, right?
Yeah.
Why would I ever want to go back to work? I'll just, for the next 3 years, I'll, sit here at the house, collect my food stamps, collect my unemployment, and hey, I'm all good. That's not conservatism.
Yeah, no, that's not at all. I mean, I'm cool with a social safety net too. It's supposed to be, it'll catch you when you fall, it'll put you back on your feet, it'll say, go back and try again. And if you fall again, cool, we'll catch you again. But the way that it's working right now, and it's both the neocons and the liberals who are saying, well, you fell, too bad, so sad, hey, we're just going to take care of you from cradle to grave. You'd never have to go get another job. You never have to do anything. And, of course, if you do something stupid, we're going to be here for you again. That's not how you run a country.
No. Well, and that's where, I think we're quickly becoming like Europe, I mean, I would love to have been, because I'm over 50, as you know. I don't mind saying that on the air. I would love to have been able to retire when I turned 50, and get a pension from the state for the rest of my life, like they did in Greece. How would you like it? Because
we noticed how well Greece went over.
Yeah, and for people that have families, a quick story here. A friend of my sister's, some years ago, about 10, 12 years ago, moved to France and got married. Okay. Well, again, she became pregnant and had a child. Okay. The French government paid her, she was a resident alien, paid her the equivalent of $1,000 a month for that child.
Must be nice.
Yeah. How would you like that for your kids? If the government paid you.
Hey, I'd love it.
Paid you. And if she had another one, they would have paid her, and I don't know if she ever did or not. That's just a story my sister told me some years ago. The equivalent of $1,000 a month. And if you had another one, there's another. I don't know if it's another 1,000, but they add more money onto it. And
well, hey, that's exactly what happens here on welfare. As long as you can keep spitting them out, they'll keep throwing more money at you.
Yeah, in fact, a guy at work and I were talking about that today, about how, they banned that actually in the Welfare Reform Act, right, where they were not going to give you any more money if you kept having kids while you were on welfare, right? But kind of by hook and crook, the administration has kind of waived that rule, and they're actually trying to get it rewritten, the Congress to pass the law differently. But they, how the administration does, they kind of well, we're not going to enforce that rule here, so, Well,
of course, because if they enforced that rule, they'd lose votes. All they care about is the votes.
So, yeah, so again, here we go again. Instead of having people, that you want them to get back to work, you want them to have training, in a field. I remember when I was laid off in 2001, I was on unemployment, okay, and it was not 99 weeks back then. I found out that I lived in Colorado at the time, that the state, this is federally funded, of course, had some training programs that you could go to, right? And get trained in another area, or maybe a similar area that you were in, but just something a little bit different that maybe you could find a job. And so I went down to the unemployment office and saw these brochures and started looking at them and made an appointment and came back and talked to a counselor there. And the lady looked at my file and said, well, no, sir, we can't help you because last year you made too much money.
That's stupid.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think most states have that kind of thing. I'd really like to, if they're going to really fix welfare, they really need to have it a fixed length of time. You cannot get it for more than this amount of time. You cannot breed while you're on welfare. I mean, you can have as many kids as you want, but you're not getting another damn penny. You must go to school of some sort and get an education, get training, get something, and you must work. You must do something. I don't care if these people have to go out and pick up trash on the side of the freeway, although that's going to take all the work away from the inmates. But they need to get off their butts and go do something.
Yeah.
I don't care what it is. Find something, find some on-the-job training, find something for them to do to earn the money that they're getting. If we could do that, we wouldn't have a welfare problem.
Yeah, I agree. I've always said that too, is that, I'm willing to help anybody as a taxpayer, to get on their feet again. And if that includes, having this training program where they can go and train in a new area, where they might not be going out and making $80,000 a year, on their first day out after that training, but at least they might be able to pay their rent and feed themselves and their family by that. Then I'm willing to do that. But what I'm not willing to do is to keep paying for you to sit at home and say, oh, gee, I haven't been able to find a job. There are no jobs out there. That's what people are doing now. And that's why I was saying.
Well, they're not even looking.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's why I was saying earlier that at the beginning is that the actual unemployment figure, they can say all they want, that's 7.8 or 7.9%, right? Well, those are the people that are still looking for work, or have filed first-time unemployment and are obligated to look for work. The real unemployment figure is over 14%. Because
right. Those are the people who have either stopped looking for work or their benefits have run out. The people who are underemployed, they're working at Walmart because they can't get a job in the field that they actually are trained for.
Right.
It's a mess.
Yeah, it is a mess. And also it's trying to think here. I lost my train of thought. The people that their unemployment benefits have run out. I don't know if you've read this. Now, this is really interesting to me. Are filing for disability.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So disability claims have jumped some, 50 or 75% because they're claiming disability based on mental stress. And the government is paying them, and we're paying them.
The liberals are only too happy to just go, hey, more money, out you go, and let's tax the rich and borrow more money from China because the money will never run out.
Yeah, and as I watch the clock tick up, $16.4 trillion of debt. Eventually that is, you hear economists on both sides. The liberal economists are saying, in fact, I read something about this the other day. Gosh, I wish I'd have clipped it and sent it to you. There was this liberal economist, I guess he's liberal because of the way he was, his article read. But he said that don't worry about the debt. The debt means nothing. And I said, and went, huh? The national debt. Well,
well, actually, it really doesn't. It's all paper. It's all imaginary money. Anyway.
Well, yeah, it's true. But he was saying that quit focusing on trying to cut the debt, and just go ahead and spend money, stimulus money, whatever you're going to do, because it doesn't really matter. And I thought, well, I wish we could do that personally. I wish I could just go out and take my credit cards and max them all out, and then once they got maxed out, that credit card company would just say, oh, hey, here's another $10,000, and I could max that out again and never have to worry about repaying it. But I think it's going to come due eventually, just like it has in Europe and a lot of the countries, in Italy and the pigs, right? Portugal, Italy, Ireland, Greece, and Spain.
Right.
The debt is coming due. You've got to pay your bills. And when the debt gets so big that we can't even pay the interest on it, I mean, how much of our budget goes to be paying interest on the debt right now?
A lot.
Yeah. And so you're going to have all these social services. You need to have a military. You've got when I say social services, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. and all the things that come under all that, as we were talking about, a military, and now, once the debt gets so large that the interest on the debt becomes so large, you're going to have to cut somewhere, right? Where are you going to cut? Because you only have so much money. When the interest on the debt becomes so large that because people want their money, I buy your bond, I expect to get paid interest on it. Okay, I buy your treasury bonds, I want to get my interest off of that every year. So how are you going to pay me? Because
well, the biggest problem with this stuff is, and this is true up and down the scale, most of the things that we spend money on are not discretionary. We can't cut them. By law, we cannot cut any of these spending programs. And when you look at the things that we actually can touch, it's not enough to make up the difference. We've written all of these expenditures into law, said we can't do anything about them. These are going to be paid all the time, first up front, end of discussion, and then we're stuck. And the only reason that we're still doing this is because a lot of the people in Washington think, hey, we're the U.S., we're number one, we're the most powerful on the planet, we can get away with anything, and we'll never have to pay this back. We don't think we're ever going to have to pay China back. What's China going to do when they own 80% of the U.S. and they just say, screw it, we're going to foreclose on you? They don't have a military, we can nuke the crap out of them, they can nuke the crap out of us, but between that, what's going to happen if China says enough is enough, we're calling our debts due?
Yeah, and again, when you're starting, they'll have to cut something. I mean, I realize that most of the stuff is written into law where they can't, but it's just like what's happened in Europe. There will come a fiscal crisis in this country where people are going to have to make some hard decisions. And when I say the people, I really mean the people are going to have to make some hard decisions because Washington's not going to do it. What do we do at that point? Just like what they're doing they could say, well, we're going to raise taxes on everybody. Well, we see how well that's worked out. Let me see. Francois Hollande, the Prime Minister, President, whatever he is, of France, President, I guess, has been touting this 75% income tax on people that make $1 million basically or more a year. Guess what's happening?
And Depardieu said, "Screw you," and left. The country.
Oh, and one of the richest people in the world just did that. Moved his company to Belgium. I can't remember his name. He owns a lot of these, like who's the purse makers and fashion design stuff. He's like a multi-billionaire. Well, he has just picked up his company and moved it, and moved his own personal assets, which is his own personal assets are, in the billions, to Belgium. And he's actually applying for Belgian citizenship, and they're thinking, well, he may or may not get it. The Belgians have to decide if he's going to get it. But
if I was the Belgians, I'd be going, hell yeah,
oh yeah,
come on in, because he's going to be paying some kind of taxes, and it's a windfall for them either way.
No, I agree. And again, Gerard Depardieu became a Russian citizen. The Russians were like, hey, yeah, we'll take your tax money. And they gave him citizenship almost immediately. I don't even know if he had to fill out a form or not. It happened so fast.
Probably not.
It happened so fast. And so more and more people, and the reason that a lot of artists and everything, American as well as, like British and wherever, moved to France was not necessarily because of their low tax rate, but, they weren't going to be overly taxed, to live in France. And now they're finding out that, oops, here we go. Another one, Johnny Depp has left. Johnny Depp has lived in France for, 20 years?
Yeah, he's been there for a long time.
And he's left. So they're all moving out.
Well, the funny thing is, and this is true in the U.S. too, it's funny whenever something comes up on the ballot to tax the rich, everybody who's not rich votes for it because they figure, hell, I can get some money out of it and I don't have to pay into the system. But the rich are eventually going to say, wait a minute, we're not doing this anymore. And the rich are a limited supply. Happens in California all the time. We keep raising the taxes on the rich up and out of the state they go.
They take off.
And that's why they never have any money, because all the people that they've decided they're going to screw over have decided we're out of here.
Exactly. And, and also, lots of things wrong with California. I've lived there twice in my life, and
it's a disaster.
It's a complete disaster, and it's a shame that it is, because the first time I lived there was in the late '60s. I was a teenager then, and schools, for instance, in California were ranked very high. I can't remember where they were. I'm talking 68, 69, because right after that, my dad retired. My dad was in the service. And we moved back to Texas because that's where they're from. And I registered for school. I was actually in the 8th grade. Junior high school is what we called it back then, in California in 68, 69. And these, I thought I did very well there. And it wasn't easy. It was a difficult curriculum. So anyway, the next year I start as a freshman in high school in Texas. And so my mom, takes me up to see the counselor, and they say, okay, as a freshman, he needs to take physical science. I've already had that. You need to take algebra. I've already had that. I've already had that. See, look, here's my transcript from California. And so I was a year ahead of the kids in Texas. I don't know where Texas fell at that time, but I was kind of surprised at that. That was the first thing I ever realized about the differences. I'm getting old enough to pay attention instead of just.
Well, I'm sure they're still pretty low today. I mean, let's face it, Rick Perry running the show.
Yeah,
it's got to be pretty bad.
Yeah, and for instance, I never took calculus in high school. It wasn't even offered at my high school until after I graduated. Some couple of years, 2 or 3 years after I graduated, where again, I would have probably had, if my parents would have stayed in California after my dad retired, and the only reason they didn't was it was too expensive. Even then, is that I probably would have had a couple of classes in calculus in high school. But again, that's just kind of the differences in where this country is going. We've allowed, and I say allowed, well, hell, we voted them in to.
Well, yeah, because they make promises that we know they can't keep, but we don't care as long as they give us something. As long as the freebies keep rolling in, we keep voting these idiots into power.
Yeah, I agree, and and again, these people are, when you let the audience know out here, when you hear the term conservative, dealing with a politician, especially at the national level, I can't speak for the state level. Somewhat I can in my state. But I wouldn't say can't say that for all. But at the national level, realize that these people are not conservatives. They're not.
At all.
They are. They don't hold it with any of the beliefs. And I think that both Cephas and I would agree that if anything, we need to go back to the teachings of Barry Goldwater. And I know that's going to raise some eyebrows out there, but that guy was probably during his heyday in the 60s, not a very well-liked Republican. He was a Republican senator from my now home state, Arizona. Not very well-liked.
Well, because he spoke the truth, and people don't like to listen to the truth.
Yeah, but as he became an elder statesman after he retired from the Senate, and came back, and, he actually became a kind of, beloved, I think, by a lot of people, and think back about how he was and what he said. Like you said, he always told the truth. He was not a socialist or a social conservative. In fact, he came out, and I think we have one of the quotes on our webpage there about how he came out for gay marriage because he thought, like, hey, why not? What difference does it make?
Yeah.
And
well, the nice thing about him, all right, the guy is religious, or was, because he's long since dead. The guy was religious, but he was one of the first people to recognize that the religious right was coming, and we can't give in to the religious right. Everything he said about the religious right taking over the Republican Party came true.
Yep, and it did. The predictions he started making in the earliest one I ever read, I think, was in 1981 when he was talking about that. He may have talked about it years before that, but the first time I ever remember reading anything about it was was in the early 80s. And I thought, hey, that's interesting that he would be coming out, because I think I'd retired from the Senate by then. But he was still, a newsmaker to some degree. And he actually did say that once the religious right comes in and starts, and they are creeping in and they take over the Republican Party, that's the end of the Republican Party. And guess what? Yep.
It's exactly what's happened. Yeah. And the funny thing is most people don't even understand that the majority of these religious fucktards that came into the Republican Party with the goal of changing it into a religious, whatever you want to call it, a religious clusterfuck. These are all Southern Democrats. These are expatriate Southern Democrats who abandoned the Democratic Party back in the 60s and 70s over issues like abortion, civil rights, etc., who decided, well, hell, there's another party over there, let's set our sights on that and go take over. And that's exactly what's happened. The southern states used to be firmly Democratic states if you go back, a couple of decades.
Yeah, exactly, they were. And
they're all Republican states.
And think about it.
Think
about like Lyndon Johnson's Great Society. Guess who actually passed those bills in Congress? It wasn't the Democrats, even though the Democrats controlled both houses of Congress during that time.
Yeah.
If he had not gotten a majority, and I mean a strong majority of Republican votes, there would be no Medicare, Medicaid, there would be no Civil Rights Act. Okay? Those were true conservative Republicans then. When the Civil Rights Act passed in 1965, it would not have passed at all. It wouldn't have even come close if Johnson had not gotten a majority of Republicans to vote for it. So there's your Republican Party, where the Republican
today would never happen.
Yeah, the Republican Party of bigots that you hear about all the time. Well, again, just as you said, Cephas, most of these people that you're hearing from, the Santorums, the Bobby Jindals, go on and on and on. Those people grew up in the neocon world, which again was a bunch of expatriate Democrats, religious Democrats that wanted to come in and take over. Again, none of the great legislation, however you want to call it, that Democrats always tout, that Johnson passed this, he was a Democrat president. Well, actually, again, it was actually the Republicans in Congress that got those bills through to his desk, not the Democrats. And so now we have the same thing, where we have Republicans, we have Democrats who are for civil rights of people, equality for gays, equality for women. The ERA amendment, by the way, never passed, as you know.
Of course not.
It's still out there. It still could be passed.
Oh, they pretty much gave up on it.
Yeah, but they gave up on it. But now we see it's the Democrats or progressives or whatever they want to call themselves, the liberals, who are pushing this agenda, and the Republicans who are fighting against it. Why? It hurts their religious sensibilities in some way, and we need to get back to as conservatives. If there's any conservatives out there listening to us right now, we'd love to hear from you. And get back to basic conservative principles, so that if enough of us get together, and I'm sure there's more than just a handful of us out there in the country, then
there actually are a lot of them out there. There's actually quite a few of them in the Republican Party. The problem is they don't have a big voice, and they feel trapped because there's nowhere else to go. They could go over to the Libertarians, which have their own problems,
yes,
and never get elected to anything. And let's face it, it's great to have a political view, but if you never get into power, your political view means jack squat.
Yeah, that's true.
So their only chance of ever having any kind of a say is to stick with the Republicans. And the Republicans, by and large, don't want to listen to what they have to say.
Nope, that's true. But if we had enough people that we could get together to start electing people who do have true conservative beliefs. And what I always say is this as well. We focus a lot on the federal government. I think that we need to be more grassroots in this effort And I tell people this all the time. If you really, really want to make a change, start with your local city council and your local school board and your local county supervisors or commissioners or whatever they call them where you live. Start there and get the people elected at those levels that are going to do the right thing, and not have some sort of religious agenda. If you're a conservative, elect true conservatives in those positions.
The only problem with that is at that level, most people, you don't know anything about any of the people that you're voting for. You get a ballot and it says, this person, this person, this person. It might have a Republican or a Democrat next to it, but you really have no idea what they have to say because they have no advertising budget. You never know what these people stand for, so you're just kind of going at it blind.
Well, actually, here we do. Actually, we get a voter's guide in the mail.
Oh, so
okay.
do we. But the voter's guide, it might give you a paragraph. That's not enough to cover an entire platform. Yeah, you can jump online if you care enough and go search out their website and find out exactly what they stand for. But, let's face it, in a presidential election, you know absolutely every thought that's going through his head.
Yeah.
Because the media makes damn sure that you do. Even if they're not honest thoughts, you at least know what he purports to think.
Well, but what I'm saying, though, is if you get involved, because these people do actually go out, and I meant to do this. I was out of town last year when I was going to do this. There was one of the city council people that actually did win last year here. I wanted to go hear her speak because what the little blurb I read about her seemed to be a true fiscal conservative, and I didn't get a chance to because I had to go out of town on business. But these things are announced; they're not secret when they have these little town hall meetings or whatever they call them, little fundraisers. So it costs you a couple of dollars, to go see them, $1 or $2, so they can buy a couple more signs. So what? Get involved. Go see them. Take the time to do that. If you find somebody that looks like the kind of person that you really want to be there, and the same thing, you can do the same thing at the state level. So I say start locally, and then because these people actually affect your life on a daily basis. The city council does. Okay, for instance, my city council just did something really stupid that everybody hates, but they thought everybody wanted. Okay. We used to have regular garbage pickup twice a week. Now, I know that's unusual in a lot of places because I live in a small town, very unusual. Well, a few years ago, they started a recycling program where they, depending on where you lived, come once a month, and they provided bins, giant bins for recycling, that you could once a month to come out and, either the first Wednesday or the last Wednesday, depending on where you lived in the city, of the month to gather your recyclables. Well, this year, or late last year actually, they decided to change all that because of public demand. And we could never figure out what public they were talking about. We only have regular garbage pickup now, once a week. And the other day, for instance, mine's on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The other day, like Thursday, tomorrow, is for recyclables. And so people started complaining about it. And they haven't changed it back yet. But again, these are people that are not listening to, they think they know what the public wants. Maybe they talk to their friends, and their friends say, hey, I would rather have recyclables picked up more than once a month. But they haven't tested the waters with that, but they pass that anyway.
Yeah, that unfortunately happens all the time.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. If you get out there and you get to know who these people are before you vote for them, then I know that's a silly example, but that's just an example of how your local government affects your everyday life. Okay, where you expect X and you get Y, and so does your county. We call them supervisors here. County supervisors affects your everyday life. The decisions they make. Your school board. Holy cow! Read about some of the stuff that they're doing around the country. The different school boards trying to bring religion back in. Thank goodness they're not trying to do that here that I know of. And you've got to start locally where the people that affect your daily life, and then you work up to your state representatives, and then you work up to your federal representatives, because yes, those people at the federal level do affect your life, and sometimes it can be in the short term, but mostly it's in the long term. By passing stupid laws that they do, that it affects you. It may affect you immediately, or it may be a long-term pain, that you have to go through with these people. And so I call them more indirect effect of your life, because they're sitting in their little bubble in Washington, where your city council is just right down the street. At least mine is right down the road, where I can go to meetings if I want to, and sit there and listen, and then they have a chance for voters, the residents, to speak. But that's the way I think to try and bring back true conservatism, is to start locally.
It's a start. I mean, unfortunately, we have a lot of people who have been raised, and this has been since the 60s, the 60s and 70s. We have got an awful lot of people who have been raised to think that the government owes them something, that waking up in the morning is a good reason to receive a check. These are not people who are going to easily change and say, wait a minute, I actually have to earn this money. I actually have to do something to better my life. I actually have to go out and work hard and get a job, get an education, be responsible. Don't have a dozen kids out of wedlock. Don't do all these stupid things that are just life damaging or life destroying. These people think that that's natural. That's the biggest problem that we have.
And we've raised generations, at least one generation like that, where they feel that they are owed something. Look at the Occupy Wall Street movement that was out there. I just read an interesting article today about how they did a survey of the people in New York, the Occupy Wall Street people, that some 2/3 of them were employed, and not just employed, but made very good salaries, and some into six figures. Okay, and these are the people that hung out at whatever called Zuccotti or whatever it was Park, and then a lot of them, the really young ones, like the student types, or the ones maybe just right out of school, came from wealthy families. And when I say wealthy, I'm talking about six-figure families. And of course, as you know, in New York City, if you've ever been there, you could probably not live off $100,000 a year nicely. Okay, you can live off $100,000 a year. I wouldn't live there at all either, but
can't stand the place.
But so we're talking about Wall Streeters' kids, businessmen's and women's kids, that are out there that grew up and probably had everything they wanted, and
well, you've got a bunch of entitlement happy kids who have grown up having everything given to them, and then they realize, well, hey, let's get the government to give me something too.
Yeah, exactly, because they don't want to go out and do it on their own. They expect to graduate from college and make $80,000 a year their first year out. That somebody says,
never having had a job in their lives.
Never having worked at all. And also, I remember a couple of years ago, because I know part of that was, they want their student loans, the government to forgive their student loans. I read an article when this first started, and there was a young man, I guess maybe early 30s, who was out there, and whatever paper it was interviewing him about his student loans, and he had some $20,000 or $30,000 in student loans, which is, that's enough, but it's not like a lot of people have a lot more than that. And this gentleman had been a New York public school teacher, okay, and he was tenured, part of the union, so he had been working there long enough, a few years, however many years it is for teachers, to get to where you just can't fire them, right? But he decided that he really wanted to go back to school and get his master's of fine arts. I guess he was a fine arts teacher, his master's in fine arts. And so he quit his job, moved to Chicago to go to some school there, and he got his master's of fine arts in puppetry.
Joy.
Yeah, if you can believe that. And then he comes back to New York and finds out that he cannot get a job, and so he's upset. Now he's back teaching, but he's a substitute teacher basically, So he doesn't make nearly as much money as he did before.
And I bet you he blames everybody else for his problems.
Exactly that. He blames everybody but himself for his problem. And when I read that, I laughed so hard. Here's, again, the entitlement generation. Forgive my student loans because I made a stupid decision on what I was going to major in. I majored in philosophy. What can you do with a philosophy degree? Teach? Maybe. Please don't get me wrong. I like philosophy.
Yeah, well, my best friend got his degree in history. He has nothing he can do with it.
Yeah.
He's a teacher. But, he wants to be teaching, college, and there's just no jobs there. So he's stuck teaching high school with a history degree that really is useless. And I told him this, 20 years ago when he started doing it. I said that you are not going to be able to get a job with that. That's not going to get you anything.
Yeah, and my brother-in-law is a history professor at college, and he loves it and he's very good at it. But yeah, he knew he was never going to make a lot of money. He told me this a long time ago. He knew he was never going to make a lot of money teaching history. He started off teaching in college, but that's what he loved to do, and he would just deal with it. And today, I'm going to be really honest here. I probably make twice what he makes, and I only have a bachelor's degree.
Yeah, but if you like what you do, it's
I think so.
But it's like if you hate what you do and you sit around and bitch about it all the time, and then you blame other people because you're not getting what they're getting. I got no sympathy for you. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't have it either. Just like that guy with the Masters of Fine Arts in puppetry. it just makes me laugh.
Puppetry. I'm gonna have to look into a program for that. I don't know.
Yeah, I know. What would ever make you think that sure you love it, okay, but you're not gonna. When I had to go back to school in 1983 because I was in the oil business. I was a geophysicist. And as you know, in 1983, that oil business went bust, right? Because the price of oil dropped below $35 a barrel. Hundreds of thousands of us, I was living in Houston at the time, got laid off. And I looked for jobs all around the world. And I came close to getting a couple of jobs. And then they just dried up, right? And so I decided I have to go back to school. Actually, my sister was encouraging me to go back to school. And so I did. And when I got there, or actually before I got there, I had to think about what did I really want to do? I want to be able to make a living. I'm being pragmatic here and practical. I need to be able to make a living. So forget this history, philosophy, English, even though I love all those subjects, forget about that. Okay, let's think about engineering. Okay. But engineering is kind of an in and out thing, right? Where there's times that are really good for hiring engineers and there's times that are not. Okay, so what's the up-and-coming thing right now? Personal computers.
Yep.
I went back and I thought, computer science. So I went back and I majored in computer science. It took me like a year and a half and to graduate. And where I went to school, they mainly taught software programming. And I thought, this is great. Because I'll always, if I keep up with the changes in software, I'll always be able to find a job, right? Even if it's paying minimum wage, I'll always be able to find a job. But again, that's what I did. I didn't go back to school and say, okay, I've got this bachelor's degree in geophysics, and I'm going to get a degree in
underwater basketball.
Yeah, or something like that, and then hope that when I graduate, I can find a job either doing that or maybe go back to the oil business. No, I made a practical decision.
You could do some, under oil basketball.
Yeah, but
just climb down the well and sit at the bottom and make baskets.
But again,
hey, they should pay you for that.
But again, that comes back to personal responsibility, right? I looked at, I was pretty young. I was 28, and I looked at it and as a personal responsibility thing. I need to be able to make a living, and if I didn't have a family, but, if I did have a family, let's say in the future beyond that, then I need to be responsible for that as well, and so getting a useless degree where I can't immediately walk out, and that's literally what I did at the time when I left it, when I graduated in 85, basically. I literally graduated and went to work the next day.
That's the way to do it.
And I didn't make a lot of money to start with, okay, because I had no experience, but I had a job, and I knew I would have a future in the IT business. And again, it comes down to personal responsibility, making the right choices for yourself, and not doing it based on emotion, your feelings, or what you'd really like to do, or what you really think other people should be doing for you, but taking personal responsibility for yourself. Again, a core conservative belief.
And that's exactly what we need more of in this country.
Yeah.
Well, we probably could talk about this for about 5 more hours, but if we ever want this podcast to end,
Yes.
we should probably move on, and we can revisit this down the line.
Of course.
All right, so let's move on to You Believe What?
No. Oh, no.
And welcome to the segment we call You Believe What?, where we discuss all the various absurd things theists believe and the wide-eyed rationalizations they use to try and justify them. Each show will deal with a belief or an apologetic technique or an idea that some group of religious wingnuts adhere to, and then show why it's so fundamentally laughable. This week, we thought we'd start off looking at Christian apologetics, specifically with one of the most common apologetic claims, the Kalam Cosmological Argument. And it's funny that we're doing this, because last week I wrote a nice long post on how ridiculous it was, and over the last 3 days on Twitter, I've been having the debate with 2 different theists over the Kalam Cosmological Argument, and they've made every classical error conceivable.
Yeah, and again, this argument is, I don't know how old it is.
Well, I mean, if you want to go into some background
Yeah.
on it, I mean, I can give you some of it. In its most basic form, it goes all the way back to Aristotle, who originally suggested it. Over the centuries, it's been refined by many Muslim scholars. The word kalam means discussion or discourse in Arabic. If you've ever heard of the prime mover argument, that's basically an older version. They've really kind of updated it for the modern day now. People like William Lane Craig have really adopted this. And it's really funny, when you think about it, that a lot of these quote-unquote brand new apologetic arguments that people are coming up with are really just the most ancient arguments that are just kind of prettied up for a modern-day audience. They really can't think of anything new to say. They're just saying the same old crap better.
Well, I think that one of the things that really bugs me about this argument is that they make the argument that something cannot come from nothing, okay? And I can't remember anybody ever saying that there was nothing, from the physics point of view, right, from the universe, thinking specifically about the creation of the universe, where they make the argument, well, there had to be a prime mover, a creator, because what you're saying is that the universe was created from nothing. And no, I don't remember anybody ever saying that.
Yeah, nobody has ever made any of the claims that they claim that we made.
Yeah, I can't remember that claim ever being made. And so now give me another one. Give me another argument.
Yeah. Well, all right, let me first go ahead and just tell people what the argument is specifically, and then we can just start taking it apart. All right, it's made up of 3 different statements that are interlinked. The first, everything that has a beginning of its existence has a cause of its existence. 2, the universe had a beginning of its existence. And 3, of course, therefore the universe had a cause to its existence. For one thing, nobody disagrees with this. It's an argument that nobody is making. We all know the universe had a cause to its existence.
Yeah.
So where's the argument?
Well, the argument is that, of course, from the apologist's point of view, is that there was a being that caused it.
Which they cannot demonstrate. The problem is, if you really look at it, and it all falls apart in that first statement, everything that has a beginning of its existence has a cause.
Yep.
We cannot demonstrate anything, anywhere. There is not one single example of anything in existence that did not have a beginning to its existence. Therefore, it's a complete null set.
Yeah,
Therefore, we can just take it out of the argument and just says everything has a cause. Okay, All right, thank you. Everybody go home. We've solved this one.
Yeah, that's what I think too. It's like, okay, I agree 100% with that. Yeah, everything has a cause. Nothing came from nothing. It had a cause. There was something that grew that tree outside. That's something that started off the grass in the yard or whatever. Okay. So, yes.
Yeah, it's like where is it that we exactly disagree? The problem is theists are taking that statement, something that begins to exist, and they are assigning arbitrarily an exception to God. They're just saying, there's this God idea that we can't even demonstrate is actually real. We have no evidence for it. We have no logical reason to think that it's so. But we're just going to take this idea and we're going to arbitrarily say, this is a characteristic for this God. Says who?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I see no reason to think that is a characteristic for your God.
Yeah, I don't either. And it comes back to, again, it's again just a reworking of the same old argument that, you can't, the science can't prove everything, so God, right? The God of the gaps.
Well, that's exactly the case.
And it's like, okay, so show me God. Show me what God is. It's again just the same reworked, overworked argument that they've been doing for, I guess, centuries. That just today there are more rational people out there and reasoned people that think logically, think critically, that take a look at that and say, no. Just because science doesn't have the final answer to everything does not mean it had to be created by God, that therefore God.
Right. That's exactly the point that I was making to the people I was having the discussion with. I said, they're going, well, what created everything? I said, I don't know. We do not have a good answer for that right now. We may in the future. In fact, since I don't know that we'll ever have a way to look outside of our universe, we may never have an answer. But the reality is, just because we don't have an answer you like doesn't mean you get to run around making shit up.
Yeah, exactly. And just because we don't know doesn't really say anything. 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago, 150 years ago, there was a lot of stuff science didn't know that they know today, that they've proven. And, and you can go back further than that, right? But just take the last 150 years that they've proven. Okay, well, maybe in 150 years from now, or probably less, science will be able to explain a lot more things than they are at this very moment. So you can't say that just because we don't know today, therefore God.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, when they say, okay, there has to be some cause, and I'll just say, okay, there is some cause, but then they start attaching things to that cause. Yeah, something touched off the Big Bang. We don't know what it is. We may never know what it is. There's no evidence that it was alive, that it was eternal, that it was intelligent, that it's still around.
Right.
There's no evidence of any of these things. In fact, they sit down and say, well, everything has to have a cause. No, actually it doesn't. That's not necessarily the case. The law of cause and effect exists in our particular universe. It was created as part of the physical laws during the Big Bang. Outside of our universe, it doesn't necessarily apply. For all we know, if there's a bigger multiverse out there, there could be no law of cause and effect.
That's true.
Everything could be eternal. Everything could have been there forever, or maybe there was, something that just has always been there and it died, but before it died, it created a whole string of different temporal creators. And each creator has created different universes, and it doesn't mean that these creators are alive or, intelligent or care about us or anything else, but there's no evidence that the thing that touched off the specific Big Bang in our specific universe was an uncaused cause.
Right.
And that's where they fail, and they refuse to even acknowledge that.
Yeah, well, again, they can't prove it. By any means, they can't prove it in the Bible. They can go back to Genesis and say, on the first day, the second day, the third day, blah blah blah. Okay, everybody knows those are fairy stories. Even pastors and priests know that. It's every culture has their own creation mythology, right? The Hindus do.
Absolutely. Everybody
the Egyptians had
the funniest
theirs.
thing about these guys was we're sitting here talking, and they're asserting that absolutely everybody, every historian, even the atheists, are absolutely convinced that the biblical story of Jesus is true. That shows you how far these guys are off in La La Land.
Well, the biblical story.
It's
the biblical,
wait a minute. And they tried to use Bart Ehrman as proof that all atheists accept the biblical story of Jesus. And we're not talking about just the story that's written there. We're talking about a guy who really existed, who was really the Son of God, who really did miracles, who really died, who really came back from the dead and rose into heaven and created.
Well, Bart Ehrman doesn't even believe that. Yeah.
No, and I had to point. I said, dude, I've got his book that you're quoting from sitting right next to me. I have it right here on my desk. And guess what? He don't say that.
He does think that there was a person that all this is based on.
I think it's very likely that there was a person or group of people upon whom, who basically had some ideas that people liked. And we know that at the time there was a Messiah on every street corner.
Right.
We have evidence of a lot of them.
Yes.
So there was probably one person or a group of people whose teachings sparked a nerve with some people, and they wove a mythology around them, draped the mantle of godhood over them posthumously, and there was your Jesus. But it wasn't Jesus any more than if you find a guy in the phone book named Harry Potter, it proves he's got a wand.
Yeah, that's true.
It's ridiculous that they think this.
I agree, it is, and it's I even have been reading a lot about from the mythologist point of view about Jesus. I'm trying to remember the guy's name because I have the first edition of his book, and who's a mythicist. Then there's also people
Joseph
like
Campbell?
Richard Carrier, who I think fall into that. And I have all of Richard Carrier's books, by the way. All of them.
I have, but I'm not a big fan. Anymore.
Well, I'm not a big fan either, but I think he's a great historian. Yeah.
Or I'm a fan of his work. I'm not a fan of him as an individual.
Yes. So okay, so there is a growing group of historians and I guess even theologians that are starting to be. Robert M. Price is another one. I have several of his books that basically are starting to write about and talk about publicly that this was all a myth, that there probably wasn't a person or based on a group of people, that this was all a mythology, just like many of the other ancient religions, the Greeks, the Romans, the Persians, the Babylonians, you name it, the Canaanites. All these different religions are just made up.
Well, yeah, so is Christianity, but they just won't acknowledge
but they're trying to say also that there was no historic person that this was based on. That it was just based.
That could be the case. We don't know. We probably never will. But what we do know is that the stories in the Bible are not true. Jesus is hardly the only one that had a virgin birth. Jesus was not the only one that had wise men drawn by a star. Jesus is not the only one who escaped a child slaughter. Jesus is not the only one who did any of the miracles. We can find parallels of every damn miracle in the Bible with other pre-existing myths. He's not the only one that was ever crucified. He was not the only one who's ever died. He's not the only one who ever rose from the dead or rose into heaven. There's nothing original at all in the Jesus story.
I agree. And and if people don't believe that, then there's a lot of I guess we could give you some references on the webpage to some a few books that you could go look at that will.
Yeah, but we know that they won't because they have a vested.
Well, no, the people that are listening to this right now that might be interested.
I'd like to think that some theists will be drawn in and listen to it and maybe get a grip on reality. I kind of doubt it, but it would be nice to think.
Yeah, it would be nice to think, but it's probably not going to happen. And if anything, I think that most of the people that are listening to this are going to be atheists, probably mostly on the liberal side. Hopefully we'll get some feedback because, like I said earlier, if you're a conservative out there listening to this and an atheist, we really would like to hear from you.
Yeah. Well, actually, that was one point I was going to make earlier, and this is going to be completely, disjointed and in the middle of something else. But the one thing people need to remember about about conservative and liberal and all that, is these things are just labels. They're things that you attach to yourself that mean only as much as you assign to it. If somebody calls themselves a conservative, that does not mean that they walk lockstep and everything that they believe is the same as every other person who labels themselves a conservative. The same thing with liberal. Every liberal does not believe everything that every other liberal believes. It's just a label that you've chosen for yourself. And I don't want people to get too hung up on labels and be more interested in the actual beliefs.
And that's true. I wish we'd have talked about that a little bit more in the last segment, because it's the same way. And we, like you said earlier, we'll probably be talking a little bit more about conservatism in the future, because I would just come out and say right now that I know in at least a couple of areas where you and I have different views on certain things, and
Absolutely.
That doesn't make either one of us a good or a bad person. It's our view.
And we both have lots of liberal friends who after you're talking to them, we find out that we share a majority of views in common. We've just chosen different labels.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
All right. Well, I think we've hit the majority of the nonsense with the Kalam Cosmological Argument. We can put some links on the website for anybody who's really interested in going into it further. Was there anything else you wanted to say before we started wrapping this up?
I think you could do the wrap right now if you want.
We'd like to know what you think about what we did. We're always interested in your comments, suggestions, and feedback. Certainly if you visit our website, and that's at report.jdragononline.com. You can leave comments for each of the individual shows, but you can also contact us via email at report@jdragononline.com or on one of our individual Twitter accounts, either Bitchspot1 or JEH704. What would you like to see in future episodes? What do we do right? What do we do wrong? Let us know. You've been listening to the Bitchspot Report with your hosts, Cephas and Out West. You can follow us on Twitter by following Bitchspot1 or JEH704. Visit our website at report.jdragononline.com. Tune in again next week for more conservative atheist rants. Thanks for listening.